Again, welcome to Texas Smart City series featuring the Office of Innovation team from the city of San Antonio and Candelaria, Mendoza, joining us to talk about building equitable and inclusive smart cities, which is a really important topic. And I know we have some people. I saw Arusa, I think she's moved, she's going to probably sign back in, people joining us to talk about this really important topic for us. So Candelaria, please, you should be able to share screen. And I know we'll have more people join us. Please take it away.
All right, are y'all seeing my presentation?
Yes.
All right, let me just put it on presentation mode. All right, and yeah, Emily Royall, who's our other Smart City coordinator, is also on. She's feeling a little under the weather, so I think I'm going to take a lot of it, but I'll tag team a little bit as we get towards the end. So yeah, thanks and welcome everybody. I mostly just wanted to begin by giving a little bit of context to Smart SA and talk about a little bit what San Antonio has set up as a Smart Cities office. We're pretty new in our office is almost 3 years old. Myself, Emily, and Brian Dillard were actually the first hires for the Smart Cities team for the city of San Antonio. And mostly it was just not that we weren't doing emerging technology and cool stuff, but this was really to help facilitate and coordinate the efforts across 20 plus departments. We have over 13,000 employees. So this was our way of being able to kind of pull things together and play with technology, pilot before we can actually decide what we wanted to do as far as scaling. So I'm just going to do a quick little overview to give you a little bit of context before we get into some of the kind of core aspects of our program. So this is a diagram which just visually helps us kind of put everything into place. We are under the Office of Innovation for the city of San Antonio, but we have other departments within that office. Innovation Academy is kind of the first program. So it was all about doing process excellence within the city, figuring out how to do things more effectively, more efficiently, and leveraging resources, reducing costs. So this has evolved into now being an innovation academy where we basically train the trainer and provide the skill sets to the departments so that this innovation aspect of things can happen more organically rather than waiting for a project where we come in kind of as consultants and help a department through that. We still do that, but we definitely are trying to build that skill set across the city of San Antonio. The other program is R&D League. This started a little bit before COVID, and the formation of just kind of bringing the evaluation and partnership of university into projects. So there's a lot of universities that are also trying to evaluate new technologies and how they have impacts to the community that maybe aren't kind of at the forefront of why we implement them in the first place. So R&D League is a partnership within the city of San Antonio and other institutions like USAA and UTSA who work together on particular projects. And again, the focus is usually in academic, although a lot of them are still kind of in pilot modes. CivTech SA is kind of the happy medium between Smart SA and kind of the private sector, where we play and work with Geekdom to support this program and allow students to engage in civic technology from across the board, from elementary all the way to college and university, where they get an opportunity to use the city's data, look for solutions on how they would solve challenges that the city departments have put up for them to kind of discover. And then they also have checkpoints with those city departments so that they can learn. And then of course us, that I'll go into in a little bit more detail. So this is kind of that very visual image of all four of our programs that we're working with under the Office of Innovation. So this slide is mostly just reflecting a lot of the strategy. You know, when we came into the space, it was smart cities, right? And for us, it was building on what that meant for San Antonio and how we were gonna try to be more proactive and intentional with what we're trying to do as far as solutions. So we definitely hold in high regard. And I think it definitely helped us during this time of COVID, that we already had these as core aspects of our strategy to kind of keep us centered to the community experience that was happening with COVID and the impacts that it was creating, especially in a mostly majority city or mostly majority city. We definitely saw through first perspective how the COVID was impacting our Latino community. So co-creation and collaboration, we want to do that with communities and our partners, along with our vendors, expanding capacity for innovation and prototyping, scaling efforts. We want to make sure we're aligning our investments in emerging technology. Data governance is a major piece that Emily will go into a little bit more detail, and then alignment with existing strategic plans. I know we all have them, right? There's a lot of our departments have strategic plans, and we just want to make sure that we're coordinating and facilitating those conversations to try to minimize duplication of efforts and improve communication across our departments. So this is just some slides of how smart cities came to be, literally workshopping between departments and our partners, and just kind of figuring out what smart city could do for us to build out the framework that we basically modified and are currently using, that leads to this mission of harnessing the power and city residents to help San Antonio become a connected, inclusive, and resilient community supporting a high quality of life. So that's kind of what we're working towards every time we consider a potential project. Now, we definitely did iterations of this where, you know, we talked about the Smart Cities 1.0, the 2.0, and the 3.0, where Smart Cities 1.0, we envisioned that as very like vendor driven. Vendors came knocking on our door saying, you guys should implement this technology. This is what this is what it will do. And kind of the city taking a reactive approach of like, okay, cool, if the vendor says so, let's try it and play with it. But maybe not having kind of that holistic perspective. Smart Cities 2.0 was maybe more of an understanding from leadership of like, yes, I think my community needs this and we should do it. And then working with vendors to try to implement something that maybe they felt would be a good thing for the community to see. So like our kiosks was very much a technology that was seen by our leadership and somewhere else that felt like it was solving some solutions. And then, you know, it was kind of from the top down where we were asked to implement them within the city of San Antonio. Kiosks are definitely beneficial. They have definitely a lot of good positives, but again, it wasn't implemented through a more holistic perspective as we included them in our portfolio. So this is kind of the space that we want to be. And I think even just the evolution of maybe reaching for a model where we're doing co-creation. And again, as I mentioned before, co-creation with our community, with our Smart Estate partners, and also with our vendors, right? We understand that they have a subject matter expertise that they bring to the table, and maybe some understanding of how the technology works that we potentially don't have. We definitely see ourselves kind of as a filter and a translator of this technology and how it could be beneficial for the city or for our partners. But again, this is a space that we want to be using our community and what they're telling us their challenges are, and then working with our partners to try to figure out what the solutions are. And then of course, the vendors are a very important aspect of that. And then this is just a list of our current Smart Estate partners, our team, Brian Dillard, our Chief Innovation Officer, myself, and then Emily Royall. Again, very high level. I don't think any of this is going to shock y'all. Access to services is one of our focus areas, mobility, and sustainability. we're a big city, and obviously all those three aspects are very important to the city in ensuring that we're communicating not only across departments and partners, but also with our community. We do have designated innovation zones within our program. It just gives us an opportunity to pilot certain technologies in certain spaces that all kind of have different either challenges or barriers that then we can kind of play with the technology, see how it works, and then decide if and how we scale that to other parts of the city. Those are the medical centers. So again, very heavy in hospital staff. So transportation is one of the big aspects or challenges in this space. Brooks, this is a pretty big campus. It used to be Air Force Base, and they've done some impressive things there. They have their own networks. So it's kind of an interesting place to play with technology, and they're a pretty engaged audience that is willing to pilot and experiment technologies with us. And then downtown. So we obviously have a pretty lively downtown, and so with our own challenges like parking and transportation. So we definitely use this as a pilot space that kind of captures our high traffic area. So I think that's kind of the high level pieces. I'm going to go into a little bit of how, what we've been doing kind of in the space of COVID. Obviously, like I assume a lot of y'all probably had to just reset a little bit about COVID with obviously shutdowns, budget cuts. We definitely had staff freezes. So there was a lot of uncertainty about smart cities and where does technology and playing with technology fit in the space of, ensuring that our community is safe, has communication about what's happening with COVID. So there was definitely a balance and a little bit of a shift with what our work was doing. And again, it kind of honed in more on those foundational pieces about community engagement and honing in more on community challenges and obviously new ones that have come up because of COVID, or some that basically were made even worse because of COVID and maybe the dependency of being online and not being able to do face-to-face interactions. So we definitely kind of did a little bit of a reset, and we basically became a special projects office. So our whole team was kind of helping with certain aspects and projects that the city needed us to do. So we definitely got tagged in. It was very kind of exciting and reflecting kind of moments of really thinking about our core and our community before anything else. So I just want to share a little bit about a few projects that we've been working on during COVID. And I feel like that is definitely gonna relay on what is next for us in the space of smart cities for San Antonio. So I'm gonna skim through these slides really quickly because digital inclusion is a huge project and there's a lot of partners involved, especially within San Antonio. But I definitely wanted to give y'all a sense of evolution of what we did and how it kind of evolved to what we are doing currently. So digital inclusion was already part of the DNA of smart cities. We definitely wanted to keep it because we knew that we couldn't be a smart city if we were leaving so many people behind because of their lack of digital access. So we did a digital inclusion survey and assessment collaboration with the county and UTSA. So they were kind of our research and evaluation. So we did this survey. We did a lot of community engagement. We definitely wanted to make sure hearing from as many people as possible about what their experience was with internet. Around those three legs of the stool. We wanted to know if they had access to internet, access to devices, and also if they felt comfortable using the technology. So that was kind of the big level that we were trying to achieve in the survey. Luckily for us, we were actually able to wrap this up right before COVID hit. So it did allow us to do a lot of in-person efforts before the shutdown occurred around February and March. So this survey happened at the end of December, or at the end of 2019. So here's just some insights. I don't think any of this is going to shock y'all. It's very reflective of national trends. The one piece that we did kind of see as a aha moment was that in previous census surveys, there was a lack of understanding of why people, or the relevance of the importance of using the internet. And we definitely saw a shift in our responses with our local survey. A lot of the people that were responding definitely understood that internet access equaled opportunity. And so that was a significant shift from what we had heard in the past, which there was a pretty good percentage of people that just didn't understand the relevance and why they should be on the internet. And then again, disparities across the geographies and ties back to income and education. And then again, barriers. I don't think there's anything in there that's a surprise. Affordability, access to devices, unreliable internet connectivity, and feeling that privacy or safety while they were on the internet. Here's just a very high level broadband internet access at home for San Antonio. About 20% of our population still doesn't have access. And as you can see, our districts 1 through 5, which are more on the south and east and west side, more disconnected than our more affluent districts on the north side. And then this is just a high level map. The darker the blue or purple, depending on how it's shown on your screen, the more disconnected, the lighter, the more connected. So as you can see, the correlations between our more affluent neighborhoods and business areas versus our community and rural areas on the south and west side. We also created digital inclusion report cards. We wanted to make sure that each of our district council, city council members understood where they kind of fell in the digital divide when we had conversations around equity, that they understood why maybe we weren't doing a project in their space versus in a different district. So District 5 was our most disconnected district out of our 10. So when we submitted a project, a lot of the work was going to be happening in District 5. And then, of course, when COVID hit, you know, a lot of the departments or tasks were putting in proposals, again, to the core of public health, equity, opportunities to braid funding to help build community resilience and well-being. So our department was tasked to submit a proposal in coordination with our IT department around digital inclusion. And these were the guiding principles that we had to use. And of course, ours fell a lot into equity, but obviously community resilience, because access to the internet obviously has correlations to all these other items. And then this is just a breakdown of where all the money went from CARES Act from the city's perspective. We got a little over $270 million, and this is how it was divvied out. Luckily for us, we were able to leverage these funds to get general funds, since our proposal that I'm going to go into was very infrastructure heavy. We needed more time to spend it. So originally the CARES Act dollars had to be spent by that December. Although that deadline eventually did get changed, we needed more time. So we got general funds of a little over $27 million to do the Connected Beyond the Classroom. So this is at the very, very high level an infrastructure that we are building in coordination with 8 school districts and 50 priority neighborhoods, with the goal of connecting up to 20,000 students. So we're basically putting up monopoles, small cell technology using CBRS to build out basically an umbrella within these neighborhoods, and then giving the students a router that with the SIM card authenticates them into the network. They would basically have a similar experience as if they were logging in from their school campus, and allow them to get on and do distance learning, but from the convenience of their home. So we're in the midst of doing this project. We've been working in a pilot phase with San Antonio ISD, which is our biggest school district, and building out that in the pilot phase. And then we're also adding a few more school districts, Harlandale and Edgewood. And then after that, we'll have 5 left. So this is the equipment that the students get. It's just a router. It's a little different in that it has antennas, but it works similar to what your router would be at home. They just have to power it on. They authenticate with the SIM card. We give the students passwords, they log on, and then they get into the internet. And again, it mimics the experience I have at school. So filters and all that good stuff is also built into this because our audience was the students, and to mimic the network that they already have exposure to with their school. These are just some very visuals of the monopoles we've installed so far. This is at our Bazan library, and as you can see from the front with the trees, you can't even see it, but it's basically a very wide version of a telephone or a light post, sorry. And again, this is what the rooftop technology looks like. We put it on sleds. We distribute the weight across the rooftop to ensure we don't compromise anything. And then again, this just creates touch points. And we're working with Motorola, NetSync, Comsol. There are 3 main vendors that kind of pull all of this together. Motorola provides us the equipment, and NetSync is the integrator, and then Comsol is Cradlepoint, and help us with configurations of that technology to build out this network for the students to connect to. And then that kind of is one aspect of our digital inclusion efforts. We're doing a lot of other work, but basically through continued conversations, we've had some amazing advocacy, other people kind of having their big aha moments because of COVID and our reliance on being online and virtual, that it's all led to a work of creating a digital inclusion roadmap for the city of San Antonio and Bexar County. We basically just want to be shovel ready for us to be able to leverage opportunities as they come. So these are just a handful. The Digital Equity Plan and the American Jobs Plan is still in process through Congress, but there's an expectation that there's going to be significant dollars for infrastructure in the Americans Jobs Plan. And then also the Digital Equity Act is trying to set up a grant program that people can also submit to receive money for broadband projects or digital inclusion projects. So again, we've worked with private sector, we worked with the county, we engaged with over 140 agencies to capture what was happening, what were the challenges, where there's some opportunities. So that's all feeding into this digital inclusion roadmap. This is just one high-level document about the deliverables that we expected. We worked with Boston Consulting Group. Our private sector actually paid for them to do the work for us. And then we just worked with them to provide subject matter expertise and bring in the community organizations that then again, all that input fed into this roadmap. These are just some of those partners that are in the mix. So Toyota, HEB, Spurs Give, Charles Butt Foundation, they're major contributors here in the city of San Antonio. And so they were a part of this program along with the city and the county. And now I'm going to hand it over to Emily, and she's going to go over some data and digital governance that we also have been working on.
Hey folks, so I apologize, I'm pretty stuffy, but I did want to say that, Candelaria mentioned earlier about where Smart Cities is going. And I think for us and many organizations and local governments, we've learned that after COVID-19, we really can't talk about digital government. We can't talk about smart cities if our community isn't connected, if they're not connected to the internet. And that's really the foundation, I think, for smart cities now and moving forward into the future. And then the next question is, how do you build digital services and effective digital government on top of a connected population? And what powers that is data. So we've been thinking really carefully about how we can support how the city of San Antonio manages its data more effectively and creates new opportunities for transparency and empowerment of our residents through that process. So COVID-19, I think, really showed us dramatically what some of the gaps were in terms of data management. The COVID-19 situation really emphasized how the public wanted access to public health data about the virus, about where it was, about COVID-19 rates. And likewise, there were multiple stakeholders involved in creating those data sets. So different private, public labs that were doing testing, multiple data streams and data flows. And the entire city really was looking to the city of San Antonio to provide that information in a consistent and understandable way. So on the front end of that is access, visualization, making dashboards, creating opportunities for residents to understand that data. But on the back end of it was a very significant overhaul of the systems and architectures that we have in place for data management within the city. So we did a number of, I guess I'd say, triage type projects to create that environment. And that really opened the door for us to explore broader management strategies moving forward. In terms of our immediate activities during COVID-19, we created a task force internally at the city to really take a look at an overview of the entire data system that we had currently in place for COVID-19, and essentially create dashboards so that our own officials, our own city and elected officials could take stock of the situation. Our task force basically reported regularly to what we called the Emergency Operations Command group, that information on a regular basis. But quickly, that conversation evolved to, okay, well, how do we make this information public? And there really weren't any rules at that time beyond, of course, HIPAA around what we could or should make public in a pandemic type situation. So we worked with several stakeholders internally at the city to, have dialogues around that, and ended up ultimately with several dashboards that we made publicly available on an open data hub. Then, the next thing we kind of imagined from there is, well, if we're making this data visually accessible to the public, we also need to make it usable and searchable. So the next iteration of that was to develop an actual open data portal where residents could not just look at data, but also download it in raw formats that can then power their own innovations, their own applications, et cetera. When we first launched this data publicly, we were overwhelmed with the number of people that were downloading it and using it. We had about 2 million hits in the first 2 weeks of making the Open Data Hub publicly available, which really helped us understand the power of data as a service in our community. And I think there's often this sort of story about open data that residents don't have the skills or don't care to use it, and that's just not true. We definitely learned in COVID-19 that people do have the skills and the desire to access this information on a regular basis. You can hit the next slide, Candy. So likewise, that kind of bled into more of a conversation around, well, how do we actively engage our residents in helping them shape the process by which we collect data? We worked with our public health authority to explore opportunities for community dialogues around bias, in particular in public health data and in how that data is collected. And through multiple conversations with our community that focused on various aspects or stages of data management, we're able to see some of our blind spots in areas where we hadn't really thought carefully about how we're issuing surveys to the public, dealing with issues like the digital divide. Of course, like, are we providing online surveys to communities that we need to reach who don't have internet access? Issues around language and how we structure our surveys, both in terms of the language that we're using. Is it too academic? Is it too formal? But also, is it a diversity of languages? Are we only doing it in Spanish and English? Are there other languages that we should be accommodating? And of course, around identity, when we force people to identify themselves in surveys in certain ways, we're really limiting our insight into the diversity of different types of genders, of races, and how people self-identify, which is really critical for understanding our community on their own terms. So we hosted last year virtually several of these dialogues with our residents to help us get some insight on how we can improve data collection as an entire organization. You can go to the next slide, Candelaria. And all of that activity earned us, and a ton of other activity, earned us a silver rating under the What Works Cities program. This is Bloomberg Philanthropies sponsors basically a certification process for data-driven government. There's about 50 cities in the US that are certified. And we submitted all of these activities to them, and they awarded us with a silver certification, which is great. But that's also just the first step in terms of really figuring out, okay, how do we take lessons learned from these opportunities around data that the COVID-19 pandemic created, and really bake that into sustainable long-term organizational change. So that's what we're involved in working on right now, in participation or collaboration with our technology department, our city attorney's office, and the city manager's office. And we're basically developing a digital government program. It's centered around 6 principles. Those are transparency and accountability, privacy, equitable and secure data management, equitable access to ICT or information communication technologies, accessibility of our digital services, and the ethical use of artificial intelligence and automated decision making. Now, I know that sounds like a lot, so we're really focusing first on what we can triage most immediately, and that is around data governance. So we've drafted the city's first data governance policy. And this is pretty exciting because here's where we're able to really make guidelines to our city staff and our employees about how to effectively manage data, how to protect privacy, how to think about data in procurements, and ensuring that when we procure technology that creates new data sets like e-scooters, for example, that we own that data and that we can actually deliver that as a public service. So all of that together creates our policy. Our policy is actually enforceable. So we're going to get, hopefully, the city manager to sign off of it on it in the next couple of weeks. And that's going to launch an implementation plan for us to really bring all of our 43 departments on board with the tools and resources that they need to actually do these things. So I'm excited about that because, you know, our policy isn't going to just sit on the shelf. We're integrating it into an action plan, and that involves 2 kind of key components. First is our Innovation Academy, which our process excellence team has developed as a way to sort of, like Candelaria said in the beginning, train the trainer, right? So we will have representatives from each department go through that program and get imprinted with our new digital government principles and our data governance policy. But then, of course, we want to go a step beyond just knowing what the policy is and really bringing those departments into compliance. So we're going to leverage a program that we've just created called Data Kitchen, which is a space for those individuals who go through that training in each department to actually be able to workshop issues that they may have, start data-related projects and collaborate on those together. And of course, do some of the more administrative things like actually register on our enterprise data sharing platform. So that way we've got folks who are aware, you know, of our policies and practices, but also have a means by which they can actually take action, which is very exciting for us. Next slide, Candy. Oh yeah, and that's just our pretty certification banner that we got, and everybody can ooh and all about that. But it's not enough. We're definitely going to continue working towards gold. And then last, I'll just cover a few of our existing ongoing Smart SA pilots. So in addition to Candelaria and I managing some of these really big passion projects that we've just shared with you, we're also handling our Smart SA pilots as well. That includes our Smart SA Streetlights program. This is in partnership with CPS Energy. And the goal here is to retrofit all of our streetlights within our jurisdiction with energy saving LED lights. And on top of that, layer several use cases for different types of sensor technology. That includes air quality, temperature, parking, ambient noise, and flood sensing. And we're working with 2 vendors, AT&T and Itron, to pilot those technologies in each of our innovation zones. We're looking at ending that pilot in October, and then we'll evaluate the results and the lessons learned, and then explore our opportunities to scale that citywide. This is really exciting work because we do get to set precedents around Internet of Things technology, and really be able to demonstrate to the private sector, how the city of San Antonio wants to work with vendors in an Internet of Things type situation. The other 2 pilots we've got going on right now is our autonomous vehicle test bed at Brooks. This is basically a grant that we've submitted in partnership with VIA and UTSA. And the R&D League was really helpful and instrumental in getting this onto our plate. But the AV testbed at Brooks is intended to explore opportunities to really make our infrastructure, our city infrastructure in terms of streetlights, in terms of complete streets and streetscapes, usable for autonomous vehicles. We want to figure out what that means, both in terms of a regulatory space and permitting and city code, but also looking at that from a technology space. What kinds of sensors or tech do we need to embed in our city infrastructure to prepare it for autonomous vehicles? So we're looking at a couple streets in our Brooks Innovation Zone to pilot those technologies and explore that with VIA and UTSA. And then last is urban agriculture. We have our sustainability pillar as well, to become a resilient community in addition to connected and inclusive. And so we're working on a couple urban ag pilots in partnership with SAWS, the San Antonio River Authority, and our community partners. Those are the Food Policy Council and Young Women's Leadership Academy and Gardopia. So we've got 2 separate projects running. One is to plant a food forest, which is something that is harvestable by our residents and also embedded with sensor technology so that residents could remotely water plants or trees that they sponsor. And that's kind of an exciting way to look at how we can repurpose city-owned or parkland, including floodplain areas, as food-producing locations, which is pretty interesting. The second project we have going on is what we're calling a smart farm, and we're working with essentially a couple high schools and middle schools in our area that are going to be building smart farms on their properties and embedding those or outfitting those with technology that we can allow these young women to actually build and code applications off of. So what that looks like is, if I've got a farm with a garden and all these plants in it, how could I water my plants remotely? How could I give them or distribute nutrients remotely? And we're plugging that activity into existing curriculum around sustainable agriculture at the Young Women's Leadership Academy. So those are the 3 I wanted to highlight right now that we're excited about. And I believe that brings us close to the end of the presentation.
Yep, I think we're gonna, I mean, just to echo some of Emily's comments about how COVID is kind of changing our work and our landscape. And I think a lot of it is to the pieces around data governance, digital inclusion. With that digital inclusion roadmap, we are looking at being able to build out a broadband network so that anybody in San Antonio that wants to has access to affordable quality broadband in San Antonio. So we're trying to be bold and set our sights pretty high. And then obviously all the tough work starts to get us there. But yeah, we are definitely open to questions, feedback from anybody in the audience. Thank you.
Thank you too. That was fantastic. It is really nice to see a city in Texas with a strong plan and executing multiple projects on that plan. This is, speaking on behalf of Austin Smart City Alliance, this is the kind of thing that we're trying to head towards. And I'm so glad to see all of this and have a recording of this that will be strategic in our efforts to try to learn from you all and catch up and hopefully contribute back. But thank you all very much for that presentation. We can open it to questions from anybody on the call. So questions from anyone?
Hey, this is Ajay. Emily and Candelaria, what would be the right way to engage with you folks or City of Austin Innovation Office to collaborate or contribute to your vision and what you guys are doing?
I think, yeah, just send us an email. We can put our emails in the chat for y'all to have, and you can reach out to us and we can set something up.
Okay, that would be great. I'll connect with you folks.
Cool.
Other questions from folks? I got one that I'd like to ask if you can share it. Hopefully it's public information. Roughly, what is the size of San Antonio's smart city program? And what I mean, I assume it's, there's probably a couple of expenses. One is number of people that are focused primarily or exclusively on smart city efforts. And then one is probably, budget for pilot projects, POCs, et cetera. Can you give any idea of the scope?
You're looking at him, Jay. It's me and Candelaria in terms of staff, but we've got 3 new positions that we're hiring. So our full team should be 5. But we had
5 for just smart cities, not for innovation broadly, but for smart cities specifically.
That's correct. Yeah. Wow. So we've got a smart city administrator that we are going to be hiring that position out for, in addition to the 2 coordinators, which is me and Candelaria. And then we have a specialist role and a special project manager role. So we've got those 3 vacancies right now that we're working to fill, and we're excited. Once we get those filled, I think we're gonna explode with activity.
All right. Well, me, Jessica, and Chelsea will apply for those 3 positions now. So
sounds great. I think Jay, one of your questions was how much is real estate in downtown San Antonio? Was that answered? Jay is going to relocate.
I might just move. So do you all have a budget for pilot projects, proof of concept efforts, et cetera, in addition to your staff?
Yeah, we, so when Smart Cities was kind of formed, actually under that Smart Cities 1.0 kind of deal, we received several millions of dollars to do pilot technology with multiple departments, kind of all at the same time. And again, I think that's why I was like, I think we need staff for this, because I think it became pretty clear that organizing and coordinating a portfolio of smart city projects takes a lot of time and effort. So, but yes, we have a capital dollar fund that we get to pull from, but it does have an expiration date on it. But we usually try to reset and give each of the pilots some funds. Again, we're trying to navigate procurement. How do we do this in a manner that's quick, that we can actually implement? So like the streetlights RFP, it was cool because we actually got to lean on CPS procurement process, so we didn't have to trigger cities' procurement process rules. So again, we're trying to navigate and leverage some of those pros and cons of that. But so we do have a budget. It's not like a reoccurring amount, so we get to play with this bucket. But once it depletes itself, it's going to be our job to go back to our leadership and advocate for more resources.
You know, one thing I would love to get from you two, and I should have done this long before, and we should do this within Houston and Dallas and all of the cities in Texas, is a scoping of budget efforts that cities are allocating to this, because we can all call this an ecosystem-wide effort. We can call it partnerships and collaborations and co-design and co-development and co-implementation and so on. But if none of the entities put any skin in the game, it doesn't happen. And if this, in particular, if the city doesn't put skin in the game on certain projects like streetlights, you know, private sector can't do smart streetlights no matter how much sense it makes, because the city owns the rights of way and whatnot. So it'd probably be good to get an idea of your investment level and trajectory. And probably all of us should share that within Texas as a means to nudging, you know, lighting a fire under each city, and we can help each other that way. But it'd be great to know your smart city investment level for people and projects, just ballpark the last few years and where you are projecting it to go and where you're setting it. Certainly would love to see that here in Austin. I'm not sure what it's like in Dallas and Houston and El Paso and Fort Worth and other cities, but we should probably start doing that as we ramp out of this pandemic. And it sounds like you guys may have the most dedicated staff on this in any of the city governments in Texas.
Well, and the timing on this, Jay, it's a great point, is really important with this, you know, once in a generation, once in a lifetime funding that's coming from the federal levels. I was just listening to a webinar by Bruce Katz, the author of The New Localism. If y'all haven't read his book or seen his stuff, please do. It's you'll go down the rabbit hole of total city nerddom, and it's really, really good. But he was saying that, you know, the way that the funding mechanisms are lining up is that they will go to cities who already have this collaborative structure in place and are demonstrating success. So San Antonio, the work that y'all have been doing over, you know, the some odd years, you know, just like heads down, moving forward, aligning partners, getting everyone on the same page, and leadership from the top down, all saying this is a priority, let's do this, let's work together, is going to result in much bigger resources down the line. And, you know, my hope is that the rest of the Texas municipalities can really align on these things, because if we don't, we miss it. And it's really critical now, whereas before it was critical, but not imperative. And now it's critical to the future of our city. So that's my soapbox.
What was the author and book you recommended, Chelsea?
Bruce Katz with The New Localism, and I'll share the link to the webinar where he gave an overview and did a really nice job of kind of outlining the opportunity.
All right. Any other questions for Candelaria or Emily? We should point out that we'll be co-organizing a Texas Smart City Summit with Emily and Candelaria and the team from San Antonio, as well as go ahead, Marcus.
How about data security, cybersecurity, those type of things when it relates to data for the city? How is that being addressed?
Yeah, so I think the question was around how is cybersecurity being addressed at the city? So we have a number of overlap issues in a way with our technology department. That's our information technology services department. And we've really, I think part of the key to the success of most of our initiatives has been having leadership understand smart cities in our tech department and be so open and willing to work with us on that. So it's really that technology department that develops protocol for cybersecurity and trainings, citywide for employees around that. but we do support a lot with in the cybersecurity space in terms of integrating their policies into any of the activities that we're doing citywide, especially when it comes to our data governance policy. Now has basically consumed our cybersecurity policy and put those together in one space. So we're involved in training all of our city departments on that aspect as well.
We had a question that was put into the chat by Julie about collaboration with other departments, and was the collaboration smooth? Most of the time, no. But I think what we try, Emily and I definitely try to do in that space of co-creation is making it really clear to them what their win is or what the benefit is of them being involved. I think a lot of it ties back to capacity, honestly, that they have these challenges and it's not that they don't want to take care of them or work on them. It's just that they don't have the capacity to do so. So in essence, when we kind of take on a role of coordination and facilitation, we could take some of that capacity off their plates, but it definitely, we need them to stay engaged. They're the subject matter experts. It's their use case. And at the end of the day, if we do decide to scale, where there's an expectation that they're going to have to sustain or maintain whatever technology that we are implementing. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely a back and forth conversation. I think it's our streetlights is going to be honestly the first technology that we're looking to scale that would involve multiple departments in that sensor use case piece. But yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of great conversations that have been going on around what does that mean as far as next steps. And I think we're just going to continue to do that. I think the good thing is that we'll have data that if it needs for them to have to advocate for additional dollars for a technology or a staff, we will have that in place for them to do so during the budget development process. And Emily, feel free to jump in as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on the department a little bit. There's some departments that have, gems, people who really understand this work and want to be involved. And then there's also departments that are not as familiar with the smart city space. And, our job really is to translate that out of the lingo of smart cities and into, results for departments to help them do better what they already are doing. So like Candelaria mentioned, the smart streetlight sensor pilot was a good example of that because, we're doing sensors, we're doing smart city. On my end, it's about Internet of Things technology. It's about setting regulation and precedents around that. But for my city department that owns an air quality sensor, it's about making sure that sensor is calibrated to state standards, making sure they're located in places where we're going to generate useful data, making sure that data can be accessed by them and enhance their policy making. So I think it's always kind of a balance between the big picture items and then making sure that smart cities work not just for our community, but for the departments that are delivering services too.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you, Candelaria. We're at 1 o'clock on the nose. So we have to sign out and let people be respectful of your time, let you get to your next appointments. Thank you all very much. Look forward to sharing this recording with many other people. Have a great day, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.